האם זה באמת סגולה בדוקה? הסגולה ללמוד בזה?
Erev Tov and good evening. We're in the Zera Shimshon on Parsha's Trumah, and we are doing Os Yud, that's section number 10. Before we start, let's take a look at a pasuk from the Parsha, from Parsha's Trumah, and we're actually also going to take a look at a Rashi. So first of all, the pasuk is Perek Chav Hey pasuk Yud Aleph, and it's talking about the Aron, the box, the special box that was made to contain the luchos, the tablets that Moshe received on Har Sinai, actually, and ultimately both sets of luchos, the first broken set, which the Gemara refers to as the shivrei luchos, the broken pieces of the first tablets, in addition to the whole second set of tablets, the luchos, were kept in the Aron. And here's what the pasuk says: Vitzipisa osav oso zahav, and you should cover it. You should cover this box in gold, zahav tahor, in pure gold. Mibayis umichutz titzapenu, from the inside and the outside you should cover it. Ve'asisa alav, and you should make on it zer zahav saviv, a golden crown all the way around. Okay, so the Torah gives a command to make this special holder, this special box for the luchos, and to cover it on the inside and outside with gold. So let's take a look at Rashi, who's going to teach us something extremely important and unexpected. Mibayas umichutz titzapenu, cover it inside and on the inside and the outside. Rashi says, Shalosha aronos asa B'Tzalel. B'Tzalel, the architect, the designer of the Mishkan and its utensils, its vessels, made 3 boxes, not just 1 box. He made 3 boxes. Shnayim shel zahav, 2 were made out of gold. Ve'echad shel eitz, and 1 was made out of wood. Now we're going to skip a few words in Rashi to continue. Nasan shel eitz b'soch shel zahav. He put the wooden box inside of a slightly larger golden box, v'shel zahav b'soch shel eitz, and then he put a smaller golden box inside of the wooden box. So that's what he did with the 3 boxes. He put there ended up with a gold box inside of a wooden box inside of a golden box. V'chipa svaso ha'elyona b'zahav, and then he covered the top of all the boxes with a gold, the top edges. Nimtza mitzupe mibayas umichutz, and in this way you find that it was covered with gold on the inside and the outside, but of course not in the way we would have expected when we read the pasuk. We of course picture a box, a wooden box that is then covered with gold on the inside and the outside, not 3 boxes. So that's what the Zera Shimshon is going to talk about. Os Yud, section 10, Parshas Trumah. Ve'osu Aron atze shitim. So the Zera Shimshon begins by quoting the pasuk. They should make a box of shitim wood. Pirush Rashi explains, and this is the Rashi that we looked at. Shalosh aronos asa B'Tzalel. 3 boxes. B'Tzalel made 3 boxes. V'chule, etc. So the Zera Shimshon says, Makshim ha'olam, the whole world asked the question. Im HaKadosh Baruch Hu lo tziva lo ela echad shel eitz mitzupe zahav. If Hashem only commanded that 1 box should be made, 1 wooden box that should be made and then covered in gold, kidichsiv, as the pasuk apparently clearly states, ve'asu Aron atze shitim v'tzipisa osav v'chule mibayis umichutz titzapenu. This is Zera Shimshon quoting the pasuk. It seems very clear. And they should make a box of shitim wood, and you should cover it on the inside and the outside. It should be covered. And that's the command. So lama asahu shalosh aronos. Why did B'Tzalel make 3 boxes. It doesn't say in the Torah to make 3 boxes. It says to make 1 box and cover it on the inside and the outside with gold. So a very straightforward, fundamental question. How could Bezalel depart from the, again, seemingly very clear and explicit command in the Torah to make 1 box and to cover it on the inside and outside with gold? V'yesh lomar, and we can say, the Beperik Hey Diyoma, in the 5th chapter of the Talmudic Masechet of Yoma, Amrinon, we say, Kol Talmid Chacham she'ein tocho kivoro, eino Talmid Chacham. Any Torah scholar whose inside is not like his outside is not considered a true Talmid Chacham. Shenemar, and the Gemara quotes our pasuk, mi bayis u'michutz titzapenu. On the inside and the outside, it should be covered in gold. So the Gemara takes our pasuk, which of course is talking about the Aron and how it needs to be covered on the inside and the outside with gold. And it says from this mitzvah, from this command in the Torah, we learn that to be a Talmud Chacham, to be considered a true Torah, an authentic Torah scholar, you also must be inside and outside from gold, golden on the inside and golden on the outside, and you can't be insincere, and you can't have an outside that doesn't match your inside. So if everything looks good from the outside, but on the inside the person is not sincere, or the person doesn't have the correct motivations and the correct Yireh Shamayim, then the Gemara says that person is not a true Talmud Chacham. U'Betzalel hayu yodea, and Betzalel, the architect of the Mishkan, knew she'ha'aron shehu hakli shebesocho genuzim haluchos. He knew this idea, this concept, that the Aron was the vessel in the Mishkan in which the luchos were held. Hayadugma umashal, it was the paradigm, and it was the symbol l'Talmud Chacham, for a Torah scholar, shebo genuza haTorah, that within him resides the Torah because of his vast Torah study and Torah knowledge. Umishum hachi, and because of this, because Betzalel knew when he was making the Aron that it was the symbol for true, to show us what a true Talmud Chacham is required to be like. Ra'a b'chachmaso, he saw in his wisdom she'eno min haroi, that it would not be appropriate la'asos Aron eitz, to make a wooden box, ulitzapos oso zohav, and to then cover it with gold. He saw that that would not be the appropriate path to take. The hoil shetzipoi hakelim hu botel legabe hakli, since we have a halacha that the covering on a utensil is considered secondary and is considered nullified to the kli, to the utensil itself. Kemoshe sheposak harambam, as the Rambam just states the halacha, and you can see this is from the 4th chapter of Hilchos Kelim, the laws of vessels and utensils, and the Rambam's Mishnah Torah, his code of Jewish law. So since the halacha is that when you put a covering on a utensil, it becomes very much secondary to the utensil, and it loses its own identity. Hachi nami, so too, hayinu omrim, we would have said, shetzipoi hazohav batel legabe ha'etz. We would have said, had Betzalel made the Aron with one wooden box covered with gold, we would have said the covering is secondary to the box. The box is the ikr, the box is the main thing, and the gold is just a decoration, it's decorative. Talmud Chacham nami, and therefore Torah scholars could have learned from this that it would be permissible to follow after and to pursue physical desires, and that would Talmud Chacham would think that's okay. Shahare haguf huwa ikar, because he would learn from the Aron that the body of a person is the main thing. Vehatzipoi, and the gold covering, which represents the neshama, the spiritual component of a human being, hu hatofel, it is secondary. And that would, of course, not be a lesson that we would want Talmidei Chachamim to deduce and to extract from the Torah, this description of the Aron. So let's go back and recap here for a moment. The Zera Shimshon's fundamental question was, why did Bezalel make 3 boxes when it looked like he should only make 1 box and cover it with gold inside and out? And so Zera Shimshon says we need to understand this important Gemara in Maseches Yuma, which says that the Aron wasn't just the most important vessel in the Mishkan, but it also was a symbol for Torah scholars, for Talmidei Chachamim, and what Talmidei Chachamim should strive to be like and strive to do. And that is an extremely important thing. And as Bezalel thought, if he made a wooden box and he just covered it with gold and followed the seemingly literal, clear direction of the pasuk, then we would have looked at the Aron and said the main thing, the ikar, is the box, and the outside covering is just decorative and it's secondary. And therefore, Talmidei Chachamim might have said, applied to themselves this idea that their body is the ikar and their physical needs are primary, and the Torah that they study and the Torah that they hope to observe is important, of course, but and that affects their neshama, but their neshama is secondary, and that which is secondary should not take precedence over that which is primary. And so, since Bezalel didn't want that to happen, he did not make a single box of wood and cover it with gold. And let's continue. And if, in fact, the intent of the pasuk was for Bezalel to make 1 wooden box instead of 3, then the pasuk should have said, Ve'osu aron atzei shitim, and they should make a box of shitim wood, v'tzipisa osav, and they should cover it, mibayis umichutz, from the inside and the outside, v'sulo, and the pasuk should not have said anything further. That should have been the end of the command. Make a box and cover it inside and out. Umidikosav titzapenu, and from the fact that the Torah added the word, you should cover it, an additional word that's saying you should cover the Aron, shmamino, we learn from this, shahatzipoi hu davar bifnei atzmo. The covering should be considered its own thing. V'yesh lo shem bifnei atzmo, and it has its own name. When the Torah has already said vitzipisa, you should cover the box, that's enough if you're going to just cover a wooden box. But by saying titzapenu, again, repeating the word and saying you should cover it, that teaches us that the tzipoi, the covering, the gold covering, has its own identity, its own name, and its own chashivas, its own importance. The eno bato legabe hakli, and it should not be viewed as secondary in relationship to the box itself. V'lochein asa shalosh aronos, and that's why Bezalel made 3 boxes. Bezalel understood from the wording of the pasuk that the covering, the golden covering of the Aron, was not intended to be simply put on a wooden box and viewed as secondary to the box, but rather had to have its own identity and had to have its own importance. And therefore he understood that you needed a golden box, an independent golden box on the inside and an independent golden box on the outside. And in this way, you would have the wooden box and you would have 2 golden boxes, and each would have its own separate independent identity. Shelifamim haTalmud Chacham tzarech sheyachnif l'rasha machmas eze hechrech. because sometimes, and here the Zera Shimshon is going to talk about in our using the Aron as a paradigm for the Talmud Chacham, for the Torah scholar, how this idea of the three boxes plays out. So he says sometimes a Talmud Chacham, a true authentic Talmud Chacham, needs to flatter a wicked person because of some need. Imagine as used to happen in medieval times very frequently, imagine one of the great Rabbanim, for example, the Ramban, Nachmanides, gets called in front of the king of Spain, and he must treat the king with the utmost respect, and he must use flattery and flowery language to follow the protocol of how one speaks in front of a king. And it's absolutely necessary. People have lost their lives. People could lose their lives by not appropriately speaking in front of a king and a monarch. So imagine that situation, and you can see what the Zera Shimshon is referring to. Sometimes the Talmud Chacham has to flatter and show the utmost type of honor to a person who is a rasha, a wicked person, because of that person's position. And then in that situation, the Talmud Chacham has his gold inside, but not on the outside. On the outside, the Talmud Chacham is acting in a way that is really not the height of spirituality by necessity. But on the inside, his spirituality, his gold, is pure and unsullied. And the gold that is on the inside stands alone, stands by itself. And it is not connected to the gold on the outside. So the Zera Shimshon is explaining that the three boxes that Bezalel understood and derived from a careful analysis of the words in the Psukim also perfectly represent how a Talmud Chacham is supposed to act in this world. He must have gold on the inside and gold on the outside, but realize that the two can function independently and sometimes have to. Inami, or another situation, Amru, it says, Chazal said in the Gemara in Maseches Pesachim, La'olam yasok adam b'Torah u'mitzvos, a person should always involve himself in studying of Torah and doing mitzvos, afilu shelo lishma, even if it is not with the proper intent, even if the person's intent and motivation is not on the highest level, they should still do it. And the Gemara says, from doing it shelo lishma, from studying Torah and doing mitzvos without the highest proper intent, the person will hopefully learn and develop until they have the proper intent. But in the meantime, a person can be studying Torah, doing mitzvos without the best intent, with possibly an ulterior motive. And if that happens, the person is gold on the outside, meaning the action they are doing, the mitzvah they are doing, or the Torah they're studying, that's golden, but not on the inside where they have an ulterior motive and they don't have the highest motivation. And sometimes a Talmud Chacham can be gold on the inside and good and special both on the inside and the outside. Like it was for all of the great Talmidei Chachamim and Tzadikim through the generations. And now we're moving to the top of the next column. The Adarabba, and in such a case, the opposite happens. Ha'etz, the Hainu Haguf, the wood which represents the body, Chad Bitrei Botil. It itself becomes secondary to the two golden boxes, according to the rule of 1 and 2, 1 against 2 is nullified. That means that if you have three things, let's imagine 3 pieces of meat, and 2 of them are kosher and 1 of them is not kosher, and there's no way to possibly figure out which is the non-kosher piece of meat, then in certain situations, the Gemara says it is permissible to eat them. And there are different rules about how that actually plays out in halacha, but the rule of 1 against 2, meaning 1 out of 3 being secondary, being considered secondary, is firmly established by Chazal. So the body of a person is going to become secondary to the person's neshama, because just like the one box of wood is nullified to the two boxes of gold. Because the person's thoughts on the inside, umasav mibachus, and the person's actions on the outside, tovim v'nechochim, they are good and appropriate, umamshichem haguf, and they are able to pull the body, sheyevatel hanaosav, that it will make secondary its own seeking of pleasure, machmas idun haneshama, because of the spiritual joy that the neshama is attaining, it is bringing to the person. So let's pause here again. The Zera Shimshon is adding to our understanding and deepening our understanding of the Aron and what it represents, and telling us that when you have three boxes and two are gold and one is wooden, and everything is playing out the way it should, then the wooden box can be viewed as secondary. The one single wooden box is secondary to the two golden boxes. And this is represented by a true, authentic Talmud Chacham who takes the needs of his body and makes them secondary, and is able to do this because of his focus on the spiritual accomplishments for his neshama and the spiritual pleasure that comes to a person through studying Torah and doing mitzvos in the highest possible way with the best motivation. Last paragraph. Umishum hachi, and because of this, also shalosh aronos muvdalos zu mizu. Because of this, the Betzalel made three separate independent boxes. Kedei shelif omim al tzad hahechrech, in order that occasionally, when it becomes necessary, yishtamesh be'echad mehen levad, a person might use one of them alone. Because the three boxes are independent, a person can choose and use the box that is necessary for a certain situation, as opposed to having to use them all together at the same time. Even the wooden box, which we know the Zera Shimshon has taught us refers to a person's body. Even a person's body, represented by the wooden box, needs to sometimes be used alone without consideration of the golden boxes. De gomel nafsho ish chased. This is a pasuk from Mishlei that says, a kind person is good to himself. A truly kind person doesn't forget about his own needs. He takes care of himself and takes care of his own needs, in addition to doing chesed for others. V'chayav adam litein es adin. Amazing idea coming here from the Yerushalmi that the Zera Shimshon is quoting. And a person is obligated to give justification on something that he sees and wants to eat and doesn't eat it. In the Yerushalmi, at the end of Maseches Kiddushin, the Gemara says that if a person sees something that's desirable to eat, of course, kosher to the highest standard, but it looks good and it looks appealing, and he wants to eat it, and he refrains from eating it. Let's say he's following a foolish diet fad, and he or she refrains from eating it. They have to give a din. They have to justify that in the next world because they're doing something wrong. The Meforshim and the Yerushalmi explain that when the body sees something, when a person sees something that's looks good to eat and they begin to get interested in eating it, it's causing suffering to the person's body not to eat it. This is a Gemara, by the way, as an aside, I take very seriously. And therefore, it's a problem not to eat it. You have to take care of yourself. You have to take care of your own goof and satisfy its, in a permissible way, of course, satisfy the needs, the legitimate needs of the body. V'chein mitchila, and so too in the beginning, early in a person's life, kishelomed ha'adam, when a person studies Torah, eino adayin sholem b'midosav u'v'masav. the person has not yet grown into an individual who is fully developed in terms of his motivations and his thought and his midos, and yet he's still studying Torah. So certainly the case will be, the reality will be for many people, especially young people, that they will be doing something golden on the outside. As we said before, they're doing mitzvos and studying Torah on the outside, but on the inside, their motivations and their thoughts and what they're thinking when they study Torah might not yet be on the highest level. It's only natural for, especially again, for young people. Kidei Amrina, as the Gemara says in Maseches Pesachim, me'ikara, from the beginning, ki ovid inish adata dinavshe ka ovid. When a person does it, and the Gemara is talking about the it is studying Torah. In the beginning, when a person studies Torah, he has in his mind his own goals, his own aspirations. When a person studies Torah at first, and this could go on, of course, for many years, the person is thinking, I need to study this for my own benefit. I need to do this for myself. I need to grow in Torah. And this is natural. This is a good thing. It's not a bad thing. But the Gemara tells us that later on, the goal is for the person to say, I'm not studying Torah just for myself. I'm studying Torah for Klal Yisrael. I'm studying Torah for the spiritual benefit it brings to the whole world. And the Zera Shimshon continues, but when this person becomes wiser and becomes the more fully developed spiritually and in his knowledge and in Musar teachings, as eno maronos muvdalos, then we no longer view the person as if he's composed of three separate boxes, muvdalos zumizu, that are independent and separate from each other. It's as if all three of the boxes of the Aron have come together. And the wood becomes secondary to the gold. And the body of the authentic Talmud Chacham becomes secondary to the neshama, and therefore all three are working exactly the way they were intended to work. So the Zera Shimshon has started with a pasuk about the Aron and the understanding, the Rashi, bringing in the Rashi about Betzalel making three boxes instead of one, and has given us a beautiful explanation as to why this was Hashem's intention and how Betzalel understood it from the pasuk, from the psukim themselves, and what it means not only for itself in terms of the Aron and the Mishkan, but also what it means for every person who aspires to become a truly knowledgeable and truly observant Torah Jew. Yasher Koach for joining with us this week, and we look forward to learning Zera Shimshon again next week, God willing.